Some new security updates coming in Android 17, Signal adding some security features as well, Windows BitLocker 0 days, and a lot more stories are coming up on This Week in Privacy, so stay tuned. Welcome back to This Week in Privacy, everyone. This is our weekly series where we discuss the latest updates with what we're working on, what's going on in the Privacy Guides community, and this week's top stories that we've seen in the data privacy and cybersecurity space. I'm Jonah, and with me today is our wonderful video producer, Jordan. How are you doing, Jordan?
I'm doing great. Really looking forward to jumping in with the stories this week.
Sweet, glad to hear it. Before we get into it, I'll just remind people that you can leave your questions in the chat. We do Q&As throughout the show, especially if you're asking about something we're talking about, but we also have a Q&A section at the end where you can leave chats as well, and we will go through some of the posts we see on the forum. So with that out of the way, Jordan, why don't you start us off with the first story?
Yeah, absolutely. So this week, we definitely did see some interesting stuff on the Android side of things. So this story here, I don't know if everyone's seen so far, but there was a not Android, not Google I/O, but I guess, pre-show to Google I/O, which is this week. And basically, there was a bunch of new privacy and security features that were announced for Android 17, which is the latest and newest version of Android that will be released, I guess, coming up in the next couple of months, I think, the next 6 months. So yeah, this is definitely really exciting. So kind of like quoting, I guess, from Google's press release here. This is Android elevates mobile security with new AI-powered protections and advanced safeguards to help keep you safe. So one interesting thing about this this update is I'm not sure if all of these features will be available to everyone that uses Android, or if these features are specifically only available on Google devices. Like, it's not super clear of that, because a lot of the features that are listed in this article are said to be, I guess, part of Google's proprietary stuff that they add to Android itself. So just take that with like a grain of salt here. So the first thing that they said that they were adding was enhanced protections for banking scam calls. And basically this is where scammers are able to basically impersonate financial institutions and trick people. But with this new change, it's going to be able to basically check to see if the person that's calling is actually from like your bank or financial institution, which is good. I think that's going to definitely cut down at least a little bit on scams. But again, that is sort of something that Google is able to do just because they have such a large amount of data about everything, and businesses, they can kind of use that information for that purpose. I guess the next thing here is live threat detection, which is it's sort of a app to the way I saw this was sort of a protection against stalkerware and these sort of apps that basically gain permissions that most normal people probably wouldn't want to give to an app. So this sort of uses on-device, they say on-device AI to analyze app behavior and alerts you if an app starts acting suspiciously. So I do think this is also another thing that's like not actually part of Android. It's only part of like Google's editions, which is kind of frustrating because it would be better if this was available, because like a lot of these features I'm thinking aren't going to come to Graphene OS or any of these other alternative Android operating systems. So I guess moving on from that, there's also some extra protections that so basically on Google Android, there's an option to enable advanced protection, which I guess if you're familiar with iOS, it's basically a similar thing to lockdown, except it's been lockdown mode, except it has significantly less features, and it doesn't really have as extreme measures. But
Yeah, because that
they've
feature's tied to your Google account, isn't it? If I'm remembering correctly.
No, there's actually 2 different things. So
Oh.
it's really confusing because Google does this all the time. They, like, name a product after something else. So there's a
Yeah.
Google Advanced Protection Program, which is for your account, which is what you're talking about. And then there's also Advanced Protection, which is another section in the security and privacy section of Android. So it's a separate
Yeah.
thing.
Not confusing at all.
Yeah, I don't know what's Google is just really bad at naming stuff. Like, what is going on at Google? I don't know. But yeah, this is an upgrade to some of those things that it did. So I think they say USB protection, which again, it's a thing that Graphene OS has already had. Intrusion logging. Um, but yeah, a couple of extra bonuses there. And they also said there's a new stronger protection against device theft. So again, like all these features are like stuff that Google's added, and that's not probably going to come to like any other Android ROM, which is kind of frustrating. But also, I think it's good that a lot of people are getting access to these features. So basically, they say here we're enhancing Find Hub's Mark as Lost feature in Android 17 with the ability to lock a phone with biometric authentication in addition to the regular device passcode or PIN. This means that thieves who may have obtained your passcode or PIN won't be able to turn off device tracking or reaccess your phone if you mark it as lost. Triggering Mark as Lost also enables additional protections like hiding quick settings and disabling new Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connections. So that's another thing that's quite interesting. And I guess the final thing here was they're offering better. This is another thing that like iOS has had for a while. It's basically the ability to um, actually, I'm not sure if this is quite the same. So precise location temporarily, which basically can allow you to share your location, your precise location only once, and then like it has to request it next time, because the main issue with that is if you allow it once, it basically can just access your location if you're using the app at any time. So that's not the greatest for like privacy stuff, right? So that is a good thing that they're adding. But yeah, there's some more stuff about like the private compute core and stuff like that. But
Yeah, I think, that last thing, I guess I didn't read exactly how it works. I don't know if it I only saw the temporary precise location sharing and not exactly how it works, but I would imagine it's like if you share your approximate location with an app, you can choose to sometimes lock in. Because I think right now you can already, choose to share your location on a one-time basis, but this might be
mm,
useful for, uh, certain apps where you're normally sharing, like, the approximate and wanna temporarily share your precise location for whatever reason. Um, there are a couple features in here that are coming, I believe, to all of Android and not just Google specific things. So, they added some security features that will reduce the amount of pins or passwords that you can enter and increase the delay between failed unlock attempts. So that'll be better for physical security. Um, they are I mean, I don't know if you're using AI stuff, anyone, but they're adding some additional hardware isolation for AI things that are running on your device, which might be useful for some people. I don't know if that'll be something that OEMs can implement, but uh, that I don't know how many apps currently use these AI features besides like Google's apps themselves. So there's that. There's also I think one of the bigger things is that carriers, who are selling their own phones will be able to ship them with 2G disabled. So, like, in the US, there are no 2G and 3G networks anymore, so, carriers will now be able to, disable that completely on devices they sell. I don't know if that'll be, like, a configurable setting if you buy an unlocked device from Google. Hopefully, it is. I know, obviously, Graphene OS has had that feature for a long time. Um and yeah, I believe they mentioned something about post-quantum cryptography in some areas as well, although I don't think they specified which exact features are getting that. Um, so yeah, I think like you were saying, Jordan, there's a lot of very Google specific stuff. All of the calling stuff is going to be related to Google's dialer, which has been a pixel specific feature for a while. I mean, Google has been really taking away all of the features from AOSP and bringing them into Google Play and their own apps, which is unfortunate. So a lot of people will be missing out. But if you're using a custom ROM like Graphene OS, you're definitely gaining a lot of security advantages, even if you lose a couple nicer features like this. So uh, certainly not everyone in the Android space is worse off. But yeah, it is a shame that some of these features definitely rely on like Google integration and also Google's just vast knowledge of all of this data stuff to protect against scammers. It's not clear to me how they are going to do that, if they're going to be sending all of the incoming calls to Google for them to check, or how that database works. So there's definitely some privacy concerns I would have with some of these new features, unfortunately.
Yeah, I do think as well, like, I just wanna also say, like, if anyone else watched the Google, I think they called it the Android show Google I/O edition, but it was very much like if you watch the event, it's like they're stuffing AI into everything. So I think Android 17 is not really gonna be, I think it's definitely gonna be a downgrade from a privacy perspective, but it was already pretty terrible. But I guess for people that are using, like Graphene OS or other different private like custom operating systems, it's going to be a bit of a bump. But like I think a lot of these features that they're even here, like you said with the 2G and 3G toggle, I'm pretty sure Graphene OS has already had that for a while as well. So it's like, you know, I feel like they are kind of playing a bit of catch up on that front. But it is kind of a shame that like some of this stuff is so Google specific and Google Play services specific because yeah, it'd be good to see some of these features on like AOSP instead of just Google's proprietary stuff. So yeah, not really. I mean, I think it's still going to be an upgrade, but not as big of an upgrade as we were hoping.
Yeah, feels like it never is with Android stuff these days. With Yeah, with no questions that I see in the chat about any of this stuff, I don't think I have too much else to add about this. So unless you do, Jordan, we could probably go on to the next one.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds good. Let's hop into the next topic here.
All right, this article is from Bleeping Computer, Signal adding security warnings for social engineering and phishing attacks. They say Signal has introduced new in-app confirmations and warning messages as additional safeguards against phishing and social engineering attempts that could lead to various forms of fraud. The purpose is to introduce enough friction that users get the time to evaluate the safety of an external request. So they have some screenshots. Yeah, we scroll down here. You can see some more information is shown when you accept a request. So they say that or Signal is not going to message asking you for a PIN or recovery key to your account, which is good, and some safety attempt or some safety tips, like don't respond to chats from Signal, review names and photos, and look out for scams, because I think this is a very common thing, and especially as more people use Signal, we've definitely seen more headlines in the news about people who get their Signal hacked, for example. And it's never a hack of Signal itself in any of these cases. It's just a matter of typically phishing attacks, especially through Signal's QR code system, that allows you to link a device, where people inadvertently do this or fall for these scams online and grant an attacker access to their Signal data. So I think in light of all of those headlines we've been seeing lately, these are definitely welcome changes to add to Signal. And I'm glad that they're thinking about this stuff, because I think it is very important to for any messaging app to consider, because I think people are not super like concerned about phishing attacks and other social engineering attacks as much as they are concerned about technical hacks and stuff. But the reality is that stuff kind of happens all the time, and people do fall for it more than you would think, and even more technical people do fall for it. So better education in the moment, reminding people to be wary. I think that's always a good thing for your security. So yeah, I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, it's definitely a welcome addition. I think the interesting thing about this story is like a lot of this was due to apparently, according to this bleeping computer article, there's been kind of an ongoing attack against high profile users using like signal support alerts, which both the FBI, the Dutch government, and the German authorities have basically been warning, which in this case, they were using like the linked device feature to basically get access to people's chat history. Um, so I think this is also like because some of the new features with Signal allow for basically transferring your chat history across to like a different client. So like I think that is kind of a pretty big issue as well. Transferring the data, especially like messages you've already sent, is kind of a big threat. So it's good that Signal's taking like a quick approach to kind of squash this before it becomes too much of an issue.
Absolutely.
But yeah, this is sort of like a kind of a short story here. Not really much to add. It's just kind of like Signal's kind of getting a bit stronger against this because, yeah, it's not when you add someone on Signal, it was sometimes it's not super clear if someone is like a suspicious um if someone is a suspicious person, but this is definitely a lot more clear that and it gives proper tips and like actual it requires you to actually press accept and like look at the person's name and stuff. So I think it's definitely going to help some people, maybe not people in our community, but like definitely people who are targeted by these attacks.
Yeah. It's good changes for sure. And like I said, it's very good that these companies are um, keeping this in mind. We don't have this story in our notes here, but I just saw this morning. There was some controversy with Mulvad and how they implemented a feature, and they were also pretty responsive about uh, implementing a fix for that. And that was just another example of, I think, these less serious concerns with them. In Mulvad's case, it wasn't super serious. You can read a bit more about that on the forum if you're interested, but also like Signal already has decent protections against phishing, and now they're going, I think, a step above and beyond. And that's what we really hope to see from, I think, any of these privacy companies, that they just go the extra mile and keep people safe, you know?
Definitely. And I think I haven't actually read that story yet because like I haven't really been checking the news too much today. So I think we could definitely talk a bit about it maybe after during the forum updates. That could be definitely interesting to see what people are saying. But
Yeah.
yeah, do you have anything more you want to talk about on this one or
I don't think so. A lot of pretty simple stories today. I think, in the interest of, since we have a few more stories left, I might change up the order of stuff in our notes a bit quick and do another story here. This one's about Windows BitLocker. So this is also from Bleeping Computer, which is a great news source that we get a lot of information from. Their headline is Windows BitLocker 0-day gives access to protected drives, and a proof of concept was released. So the article goes, a cybersecurity researcher has published proof of concept exploits for two unpatched Microsoft Windows vulnerabilities called Yellow Key and Green Plasma, which are a BitLocker bypass and a privilege escalation flaw. Uh, Known as chaotic eclipse or nightmare eclipse, the researcher describes the BitLocker bypass issue as functioning like a backdoor because the vulnerable component is present only in the Windows recovery environment, which is used normally to repair boot-related issues in Windows. So scrolling down to uh, what the actual bypass here is, um, it says if you place specifically crafted files onto a USB drive and then reboot into WinRE, which is that recovery environment I just mentioned, you can trigger a shell by holding down the control key. Um, and and that shell that opens up the command line prompt will gain unrestricted access to the storage volume protected by Bitlocker. So this is probably possible on Bitlocker devices because the keys for that on most setups are not tied to a specific pin. Um, However, uh, which is also what another security researcher said about this, but the researcher that initially discovered this, has said has now claimed that this bypasses, even a setup with TPM and pin protection. So, it's not exactly clear, I think, at this time, how this bypass exactly works, and maybe the pin protection is not, implemented properly for some reason in Microsoft, which is strange because you would think it's, like, tied to the encryption itself. Um, so, yeah. According to the security researcher, it does. They haven't published the proof of concept, at least I believe for that exploit with the pin. I'm not sure if they published it with the other one, but either way, um, very concerning if you rely on BitLocker for Windows, which we do typically recommend to keep secure boot intact. But I think we especially recommend just not using Windows at all because it's kind of a security nightmare for so many reasons, and this is just yet another example of that being the case. When you were looking at this, Jordan, did you run into any other things that you wanted to highlight here?
I mean, yeah, I think it's definitely interesting that there's sort of conflicting information on this exactly. Like how you said the pin, having a pin in addition to the BitLocker encryption might be able to be bypassed. I think it'd be interesting to know, like, I feel like the way that Windows, like, implements encryption is, like, really, really weird. Like, they got, like, what is it? Device encryption, and then there's BitLocker, and
Yeah.
then you can use BitLocker with a PIN or a password. Um, so yeah, I feel like it's the way they do it is, I don't know, it seems kinda janky. So I'm not specifically, that surprised, but I do wonder if, like, this would also affect the device encryption as well, because that's sort of a separate system. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't use, like, it is kind of automatically turned on, like, new devices that support Windows 11. So I don't know. There's not really any mention of that in particular, in this article. So I was kind of interested in that, but
Yeah, it's strange stuff. Again, I think there's not too much I can add because the obvious answer is to just not use Windows at all, especially to protect any super sensitive information like this because these kind of security breaches are unfortunately very common.
yeah, and also I think, yeah, I think it's. I'm not really sure if using. I mean, we do recommend to use BitLocker. So, I mean, I do wonder if VeraCrypt, because VeraCrypt also supports full disk encryption. I wonder if this would also affect that, or if that would be something that kind of bypasses this issue. I guess because it doesn't technically use any of the built-in Windows stuff. That would be interesting to see, but because I do believe we also recommend that for full disk encryption, possibly.
Yeah, definitely shouldn't be an issue with VeraCrypt for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, but I mean, this is sort of one of those things as well that, like, it does seem like someone would actually need physical access to the device
Yeah.
to do this whole process, right?
Which is, I think, the good thing about a lot of these attacks. It's probably fairly unlikely, but it totally depends on your threat model. I mean, and that is the case with all like full disk encryption stuff because, um, full disk encryption that's not protecting you when it comes to remote attacks because your drive is decrypted 100% of the time that your computer is turned on. So, what can it really do? Um, but yeah. Um, Yeah, we got a comment here. Graphene OS is always saying that Windows has better security than desktop Linux. Yeah, I've seen that take quite a lot. I think that's pretty demonstrably not true, but Linux also has a very long way to go. Unfortunately, these desktop operating systems in general uh, do lack a lot of basic security protections that I think a lot of mobile users are used to. So it's kind of a trade-off on either end. We've typically seen from a security point of view, Mac OS fares the best between all three of these options. Certainly not an ideal choice for privacy, especially if you don't take steps to harden it from sending data elsewhere. But um, because they've just I think macOS has adopted so many features from iOS that a lot of those security improvements do make it through, and I hope that Linux can continue to do that as well. Um, but yeah, there there are so many security flaws found in Windows all of the time, and so many vulnerabilities found in their apps that it's definitely extremely hard to recommend it for use in any use case.
Yeah, and I think also it is definitely by far the most atrocious from a privacy perspective. Like
Yeah.
pretty by a long shot. So I mean, maybe if it was true that it has some extra like security features that Windows doesn't have, I mean, sorry, that Linux doesn't have, then you'd be trading a lot for those extra smaller security improvements that,
Yeah.
I think most of us would argue are not particularly likely for like the average user. Um, so I mean, I don't know. I think
And
that is sort of a hot take.
a lot of the security protections that Windows has are almost like defending against Windows itself in older apps because Windows has long had this problem where they have so much baggage because businesses kind of demand that every Windows app from the beginning of time work perfectly on every new version of Windows, which isn't always the case, but they do support a ton of legacy code anyways. And I think it's just kind of piling up on them. And I think the recent AI changes and the recent, uh, I'm sure, adoption of AI in their development workflow is very problematic for Microsoft. And I definitely do not see the security side of things getting better anytime soon.
Yeah, it is interesting. They do definitely do seem to be pulling back from a lot of the AI features, especially since they've gotten quite a lot of backlash. But it just doesn't seem like they'll remove Candy Crush from the pre-installed app list, or do stuff like that. I mean, they don't seem to be particularly interested in protecting people's privacy. But
No.
I don't know. I think they kind of have a point. Like they're saying that Linux needs to improve in the security aspect, which I think we can argue is definitely true. So that makes sense. But yeah, that's sort of everything I had to add on this one. How about we jump
Okay.
into some side updates now?
Yeah, before we move on to our next story about reCAPTCHA and what Google is doing, let's take a look at some of those updates. Yeah, why don't you start us off with video updates, actually? Because I know there's a lot of stuff that we have in the pipeline that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, definitely. So we've kind of been. I guess we can talk about it now, but we did Nate interviewed Naomi Brockwell, and she's basically been doing some work to get a bill through the
Yeah,
in
the
the United States.
Surveillance Accountability Act in the US is what she helped draft.
Yeah, so that's basically the reason why we wanted to interview her, because that is, it's quite a uh, I'd say it's like a first. Like we haven't really seen too many people, drafting something and getting it actually like endorsed by politicians.
Yeah, maybe it's definitely one of the first times I've seen this from a privacy creator in a YouTuber. But Naomi Brockwell, she's an influential woman, and she had a ton of insights, not just about the Surveillance Accountability Act and how that act works and why it's important and how it's going to get through. hopefully different political channels, how it might have a chance to pass or how it's at least getting the conversation started. But she talked a ton about uh, different privacy stuff as well, and why, and some other stuff that she's working on and why things are so important. So yeah, when that interview comes out, I definitely hope you all check it out because it's very cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also going to be out soon for members as well. So if you're a Privacy Guides member, you'll have access to that soon. But we also did something special as well for our members, and we're releasing kind of like a bonus, some bonus questions for our members, kind of just to say a thank you. And you get a bit of extra if you sign up as a member, and that's kind of, we're hoping to kind of continue that as like something that we can give back to our community members that do support us. So definitely look out for that coming up. And we also had another video released this week, which was the Signal proxy tutorial. So basically, we had a kind of idea to sort of make it a little bit easier to get people to create Signal proxies. So if you don't know what a Signal proxy is, basically it's a way to bypass restrictions on Signal. And I know people will be like, "Oh, why are you using Signal? It's like going to get blocked. It's centralized, yada yada." But like, some people don't have the option to use another app, or perhaps they have people that are using that specific app and they don't have like another way to do it, or there's certain reasons why somebody might want to use Signal as well. Like there's definitely better metadata protections. So it is definitely an important thing that we wanted to put out there. So that's like a video tutorial, and it kind of guides you through the whole process. There's some assumed knowledge a little bit, but I think it's going to be a great introduction to even just messing around with VPSs and getting stuff set up like that. And yeah, it seems to be doing really well, and people really liked it. So if you do think that this is like a great direction for us, and you really like that sort of thing, definitely leave some feedback, because it's definitely a new thing that we're trying. And we do have some other ideas for more tutorials and stuff for the future. So if it ends up being something that people really like, I mean, we are privacy guides, so it kind of makes sense why people might like guides, I guess. But yeah, definitely check out that video as well. That's out to the public, and we should have the Naomi Brockwell interview out to the public, I would say, in the next week or so. So definitely keep an eye out for that as well. But if you're a member, you should be seeing that going out in the next couple of days. So yeah, look forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of the tutorials, definitely let us know if there's something you want to see self-hosting wise or just any other privacy related guides, because those are something we definitely like doing. And speaking of the interviews, if there's anybody that you're hoping we could try and interview or get some questions, definitely let us know as well, either in the chat or on the forum or wherever you would like to contact us, because we would love more ideas of the best stuff and the most interesting stuff that you all would be interested in. On the website side of things, I think things were pretty slow last week. Of course, there was a huge, I mean, this week there was a huge update last week, with a lot of updates. But this week, it's been more minor changes. Some discussions going on the forum. We're of course posting more news stories. So there's news stories about Utah targeting VPNs for age verification, which is bad news in the US. There's the data breach roundup that we post every week. And so stories that we don't talk about here on the show, we do often publish at privacyguides.org/news. So you can check out some of those stories there. And of course, there's a news category on our forum where even more privacy news stories are discussed over there. So yeah, that's all the stuff that I would keep an eye on if I were you. I think that kind of covers all of that. Um, what I'll say is that all of the work that we're doing, this show, the videos and interviews, we worked on, hosting the forum, the other stuff that we have in the background. All of that is made possible by our supporters. So if you'd like to support us, you can sign up for a membership or donate at privacyguides.org/donate, or you can pick up some swag if you want merch from shop.privacyguides.org. Privacy Guides is, of course, a nonprofit. We research and share privacy related information. We have the communities, like our forum that we mentioned, where people can ask questions and get the best advice on the internet about staying private online and preserving your digital rights. So, with that being said, Jordan, why don't you take us away with our next story about Google? Jordan, I think you're muted.
Yes, sorry. So yes, another story about Google this week, and this one's from Cyber News. So here's the title here: Only approved phones can pass Google's new reCAPTCHA, locking out privacy-focused alternatives. So there's kind of been a little bit of an issue with basically like AI scraping bots and such, and it's kind of caused a lot of issues with websites. And I guess Google is trying to basically fight this sort of AI scraping and bots with basically a new way to verify if you're actually a human. And this whole new like verification system, basically how it works is it requires you to scan a QR code on your device. So you grab your phone out, scan the QR code, and then it basically allows you to prove that you're a human. So there's a couple of issues with this. Like this sounds okay, right? I'm not sure if linking your phone to a website you're trying to access, that sounds like a pretty, I don't know, terrible private from a privacy perspective. Um, but going past that, like, this kind of makes sense, right? But there's an issue with this specific system because basically how it works is it uses a hardware attestation, which only works on certified devices. So in this case, it only works on, Google and Apple certified devices. So if you're running, for example, Graphene OS or another like custom operating system on your device that isn't certified by Google, then you won't be able to actually pass this reCAPTCHA test. So I guess quoting a little bit from the article, like the Graphene OS team had kind of a lot to say about this. Basically, reading their Mastodon tweet here, Apple and Google are gradually expanding their use of hardware-based attestation. They're convincing a growing number of services to adopt it. Google Play's Integrity API and Apple's App Attest API are very similar. Apple brought it to the web via Privacy Pass, which Google intends on doing too. So I don't know. This is, I guess, a move that we've kind of seen coming for a while. Like, there's been a lot of issues with banking apps and such using these APIs to basically verify if someone's device is legitimate or not. And it kind of has this alternative side effect of basically stopping unverified, in quotes, operating systems from basically being accepted. And it's also kind of problematic because arguably like Graphene OS would actually have a better security and, better hardware attestation than Apple and Google's offerings, which kind of makes it a little bit silly. And even in this post, they say, this isn't really about security. They permit devices, like quoting from them here, they permit devices with no patches for 10 years, but not a much more secure OS. It's enforcing their monopolies via Google Mobile Services licensing. That's all. So yeah, this is kind of going to be, let's hope that Google doesn't like roll this out fully to a lot of people, because I think this could become quite a sticking point for people, especially if they're like trying to browse the internet or they're trying to access, they're trying to like check out and they physically cannot because their device isn't verified by Google or Apple. So definitely a little bit concerning here. Do you have any thoughts on this, Jonah?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with Graphene OS here that the purpose of systems like this are to disallow people from using hardware, software that's not approved by Apple or Google. They want to tightly control all of that. And they often present that sort of control and, yeah, that sort of control as a security feature when this reCAPTCHA stuff has nothing at all to do with security. There are plenty of secure ways to protect against threats like this that have nothing to do with getting you to buy their $1,000 phone or whatever and making you switch to a mobile device instead of only using desktop computers. So it is crazy that they are doing this and that they're expanding the use of this, and I really hope this does not continue. I think, I was gonna mention this, but somebody mentioned it in the chat here. Epic Null said, "I hear the risk, but doesn't this also give phishers more power to pull off things like ClickFix?" ClickFix, of course, maybe not, of course, but that's a social engineering technique that attackers will use to get you to like run a malicious command or install malware on your computer. And yeah, I mean, obviously, I think a website presenting you with a QR code that you have to scan is definitely going to condition people to be do, doing these things. I think it's a terrible idea for security, and this is definitely going to worsen the security of the internet overall. So yeah, there's really nothing good about any of these changes Google is making. I don't know how widely this is going to be implemented, or whether websites have to opt into this, or if old reCAPTCHA prompts will be migrated to do this at some point. I believe more information is still coming out. I haven't personally encountered any of these yet, but I have heard in various chats that some people have been seeing them, so it might already be live. If you've seen one, definitely let me know. Some I mean, this post that we read from Cyber News says that they may have been quietly rolling it out since at least October of 2025 because they had a blog post mentioning it, and they've had a help knowledge base support article out for at least a little while about this. So, um, even if it wasn't fully implemented or if it wasn't very common, it seems like they've been planning this for a while, and they intend for a lot of businesses to adopt it, which is very unfortunate.
Definitely. And I don't know, I feel like I would say I would question whether how effective this is, right? Because I can imagine there might be some AI companies that just set up like a click farm, right? They just have a bunch of phones that scan the QR codes automatically and just pass the test, right? Like, I'm not sure. I mean, clearly Google knows some things about stopping bots and stuff, but like, I would kind of question whether this is actually a good system for barring that information. But kind of like what you said, though, it is like forcing people to use their mobile device. And also, like, I reckon you can probably get more information out of someone. Like, you can collect even more information if you have uh, access to their mobile device as well. And one thing I do wonder is how does the system work if you don't have a Google device? Like, on an Apple phone, do you need the Google app, or does it just how exactly would
Uh,
that work?
there is a reCAPTCHA app you have to download on iOS. Um, if you're on a newer version of iOS, it runs as an app clip, so you don't have to like install it from the App Store, but it's still it's just an app that you have to you have to install one way or another to run this verification.
Mm, yeah, that's not great either. I mean,
Yeah, it's bad. Those
yeah.
app clips are annoying because they remain in your launcher until you remove them. So it's just I mean, it is basically an app that you're installing just under a different name. So making you install Google code, not fantastic.
Yeah. But yeah, hopefully this doesn't get rolled out. I do wonder, like, how would this I have noticed a lot of sites have been switching away from reCAPTCHA and switching to like HCAPTCHA instead. Mainly because I think there was extra costs associated with reCAPTCHA. So I wonder if this would actually cause like people to kind of abandon your site if you enabled this, because it's kind of like pretty sus, right? Like, I'm not sure how many people would be okay to actually go through that process just to I feel like it's definitely a more involved process than like clicking on pictures of like fire hydrants or something. But yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible. I think, I mean, this ties back into the issues people had with DRM like 10, 15 years ago, which is the exact same thing. Letting all of this proprietary tech to verify your usage, and it's like that you're using your own devices acceptably according to these big tech companies and according to these other big industries. What I mean, that was a terrible decision. It was terrible when Firefox gave into it because that was definitely the beginning of the end for how well they defended people's privacy and security on the internet. Um, ever since then, I think we've seen Chrome basically be the only definer of new web statements, more or less. I mean, web standards, sorry. Or basically like having to approve all of these web standards themselves. The other standards bodies have kind of taken a back seat to these corporate interests because they hold all the keys to the features that people want to use. Like if you want to watch Netflix on your device, you have to be using Chrome browser. And all of this device attestation stuff, especially because it relates to, I mean, it requires a mobile phone, which is already bad for desktop Linux users who don't want to do that in the first place. Um, but it really is just going to lock down um, the devices that people can even buy or use even more, which is terrible. And of course, that is their goal. It's all uh, just a ploy to become a duopoly in the computer space where they can kind of control anything. And of course, that'll be very lucrative, with AI stuff especially. The general trend, I think, over the last 5, 10 years is just making people as dependent as possible on all of this tech. And they've done that by doing a lot of free stuff, releasing all these features for mobile devices exclusively, and stuff like that, because that's how they rope people in, and I think we're definitely starting to see the other end of that, which is now that people are locked in, they're raising prices, they're eliminating possible competition and all that stuff. And Name has been or yeah, there's a couple of comments in the chat here. Name said that they did have that as an option, but they said sometimes it's not an option, which is also what I have seen. Site owners can kind of control how strict these captchas are or what they default to. So yeah, it can go either way. Uh, Epic Null said, I'm not sure they see bad for Linux users as a bad thing. Yeah, they absolutely do not. This is definitely their intent to kind of destroy desktop Linux as much as possible. Kind of a concern in the open source space I would have, because I think a lot of Linux development is very much driven by big tech companies like Google, Microsoft, Meta, uh, it's all these big tech companies are really invested in Linux development right now, but they're really working on the server side of things, getting all of those server related features up and running, and completely abandoning all of the desktop stuff and leaving that to maintainers. And so there's almost when Linux was entirely like, I mean, it was never entirely community made except for a very long time ago. But when there was less of a corporate interest in just the server stuff specifically, and people were more evenly focused on improving it as an OS everywhere, I think there were some. I think that system worked well, but now it seems like all of the server side of things are outpacing what makes sense on desktop. And I think a lot of desktop Linux users are feeling a bit alienated by recent changes to Linux as a result, which is a shame, because I think it hinders Linux adoption. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways all of this stuff could go still, but this is definitely a huge step in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't like hold my breath though that this is gonna like actually they're gonna like keep this as a long-term thing, because I feel like Google is like one of those companies where like they'll dump like a ridiculous amount of money into trying to do something, like we saw with they tried to eliminate like third-party cookies in Chrome, and they had like this whole privacy sandbox thing, and then they just dumped it after like years of trying to get people to adopt it. So I mean, I wouldn't be super surprised if there's enough outcry about this new like reCAPTCHA method that there's maybe a chance for this to not actually keep like stay as a way to verify your humanity, I guess. So
Well, we might move on to like even worse methods to verify your humanity, like Sam Altman's eyeball scanning robots or something like
oh
that.
no.
I know Em wrote an article about that on our site if you want to learn more about why that's a problem. I mean, it should be obvious, but there are some great details in there. But yeah, the tech industry is not super optimistic these days, sadly.
Yeah, it didn't even seem like they I think this the eyeball scanning thing is still going. They're still trying to push it. So it's
Yeah,
not great.
there. Sam Altman's still around. He's creating the AI problem and offering his eyeball scanning solution. What can you do?
I guess that's everything I had to add. Do you have any extra things you wanted to add on that one, or should we move on to the next one here?
I don't think so. I think we can move on. This next thing is a campaign from openmedia.org, Say No to Surveillance, Stop Bill C-22. So they, and so sorry, I don't have it in my notes here which country this is.
This
Um,
is Canada.
okay, yeah, I was almost gonna say it's the US and then I saw Parliament. It does say Canada. Sorry, folks. But yes, in Canada, the government just introduced Bill C-22, a sweeping surveillance proposal that would force collection of vast quantities of Canadians' private data on every digital service and device we use. Internet providers, messaging services, and other online services will be obligated to store a year's worth of metadata about who people are talking to, where they're traveling, build surveillance backdoors to access that data to their services, and hand foreign governments a faster path to gaining that access about Canadians. So C-22, they call it the Lawful Access Act, is of course another backdoor proposal that the Canadian government this time is proposing. We see this all of the time in all of these governments, and joining this campaign, especially, I mean, if you're Canadian, you have got to make your voice heard and yeah, make it known that this is unacceptable. I think this is all the typical stuff that we've seen uh, from other backdoor acts in the past. They just want some sort of data collection that should not be possible in an actually secure system. And this bill would absolutely worsen both the privacy and the security of all Canadians, it sounds like. So this is an issue to get involved in for sure. Um, yeah, I would point out
Yeah.
this this campaign. Was there anything else you wanted to mention, Jordan?
I think one interesting thing that maybe you could talk a little bit about here is apparently, according to this piece from Open Media campaign page, they do mention that this bill in particular, C-22, it's actually like going to be worse than America's CALEA law. So it's apparently, according to them, it adds something that CALEA never required, a requirement to actually store Canadians' data in advance. So that's also not great. I did notice that they mentioned that there too. Um,
Yeah. As Nate just said in the chat, actually, Signal did post about this. They said that they'd pull out of Canada if it passes, which, of course, you would expect. They've said that about different acts like that in the UK and others in the past. And I mean, stuff like this Canadian bill is completely untenable for private and secure solutions like Signal. So there's no way they could remain in Canada anyway. So it would make sense that they'd pull out. But of course, that is that would be extremely unfortunate for all Canadians to lose access to such an app like that.
Yeah, I definitely do wonder with this sort of proposal, would this sort of thing like really actually stop Canadians from accessing Signal? Like, wouldn't it just mean that they're not going to have servers inside Canada? Like, or is that like,
I'd imagine they'd pull out of the app stores there, so that would be the primary concern. Depending on how this law is written, the biggest issue that we've seen with any of these backdoor requiring laws or laws that break end-to-end encryption is that, um, you know, it's not going to stop people's access to end-to-end encryption because there's so much software that does it. There's, you can use PGP, you can use Signal, whatever. Um, that's not a problem. But of course, the app stores are the issue, and also these governments want to make using those apps illegal. So if they find out that you're using Signal, for example, they can prosecute you just for that fact, rather than uh, need to find out what you were doing on Signal, whether you were actually committing a crime, etc. So it's all just a
mm,
pretense to uh, allow the government to basically detain and arrest people, throw them in jail, without having to do any investigation of whether a crime occurred or anything like that, because they just want to make all of these very mundane things and all of these security features illegal to eliminate hard work for them. And I think maybe they should just get better at investigating.
yeah, I think it's like it is kind of telling though with this thing, they're basically like I think when we see any of these lawful access things, like really what they're asking for is basically to access any private communications and private data whenever they require it, right? And it's like we saw with Signal, it's basically impossible for them to actually comply with this. Like they they say, you know, we've got to it's going to be done in a way that's privacy respecting or whatnot, but it's like it's impossible to add these backdoors and protections without it being, you know, opening the door for exploits, right? Like in this campaign thing, they talk about Salt Typhoon. um Basically there was like Chinese state hackers that basically were able to infiltrate like major US telecommunication companies like AT&T, Verizon and others. And, you know, like it's that was because of, you know, the lawful access um, stuff that was built because of the Kalia stuff, right? Um, so yeah, but this is like going to expand much more than just, you know, like cellular communication providers. This can apply to basically any digital service or company, right? So it makes it quite a lot worse. And yeah, there's like plenty of countries that have sort of tried to do this. Like we have a similar thing to the Kalia stuff in Australia as well, and that sort of only applies to like SMS and voice calling and like telecommunication stuff. Um, but I think the thing with these politicians is that they realize people don't really use those things as much anymore. Like people don't communicate via text. People communicate on WhatsApp. People communicate on other means, right? And I think it's just a way for them to hoover up even more information about people. And like we saw with the Chinese state hackers, like penetrating U.S. telecommunication companies, like as soon as you add that back door, like it's open. Like anyone anyone can find that back door. Like it's the whole point of the reason why we have encryption is, you know, that it's not able to be broken, like that it's secured against any backdoor, right? So that is also terrible. This campaign thing also mentions there's going to be like a metadata retention database. So this could be, you know, a bunch of basically extra information that's not pertained in the actual messages that you send. And again, this would apply to like all these online services. And in a lot of cases, that sort of information that's collected is also like just as telling as the data itself. And I do want to add here, this is like open media has been successful in the past. Like in the past, there was Bill C2, which also had a lot of these, national security protection, things that where they go on about like national security. We need to scan everything. We need to access all this information. And enough people did actually come forward and contact their politicians and actually get it to be retracted. So withdrawn, sorry. So, I would say if you are in Canada and you care about this, which you should, definitely check out this open media campaign. And it does feature, like, it has a whole form basically where you can just put your information and it will basically just send a message there. You could use that, or you could make your own and send it to your politician as well. But it's definitely a good resource. And I think, if the same amount of people do this, then what happened with C2, then I think uh, it could be good to see. But yeah, I just think a lot of times people kind of get a bit complacent when they see this. They're like, oh, it's never going to pass. Like it's never,
Yeah.
this is like, obviously this is never going to pass. And then it does. So
Or they think,
definitely.
it's going to pass inevitably, so they don't take action. I think people need to remember, like, we've seen positive results, very many times. It's not as sensational in the headlines or whatever than, like, some draconian bill passing, and I think you hear about it less, but a lot of these times, these public campaigns against acts really do work, and they all kind of end up fizzling out, which is why you don't hear about them. But it's good that they don't get passed, and your voice does make a difference, though, and you have to remember that because they, the governments, and all of these organizations who are pushing for these bills, they really have campaigns out there and really want you to believe that your voice doesn't matter and that nothing can be done about it, so you don't speak up, and that is just not true. So, yeah, if you're if you're Canadian, I would say talking about this is critical. Uh, got a couple comments here in the chat. I know we've been saying CALEA a lot. That stands for CALEA, which stands for the Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act. Um, and that is basically a wiretapping law from the 90s. Originally, it only applied to phones, but recently, not recently, but like since it passed, they've extended, or government agencies have argued that it extends to things like VoIP, things like the internet, um, and can require telecommunications providers to tap that data as well. We've seen some government agencies um, try and argue that they can use it for mass surveillance of wide swaths of people rather than just like targeting an individual. So it's not a great law. I don't know how extensively used it is because I feel like I haven't heard too much about it recently. But yeah, it's still on the books and it still is a surveillance concern. And it's why things like strong encryption, things like end-to-end encryption are so important. Because right now I think that act it doesn't require the carrier to decrypt any information that they don't have the key for. So something like HTTPS even has no impact on that. So yeah, there's some impact. There's a lot of laws in a lot of countries, especially the US, that are very concerning. But yeah, it's stuff like that. I think this Canadian law certainly sounds like it would be much, much worse than that. Charlie said on X, as always, censorship prevention, which is free on Signal. That's a good time to plug our recent Signal proxy video again. If you missed that, give it a watch because you can set that up, share it with people, or use it yourself if you're in a censored country, but you can get access to an uncensored VPS or something like that. Because, yeah, that features like that are very important. But exactly like you said, Charlie, the app stores are the main issue with things, with bans like this, VPN bans, messenger bans, etc. They will just be removed from the app store, and 99% of people simply will not access them, which is very bad. Um, and then as Name pointed out again, a very small percent of Signal users are unethical. I believe that's almost certainly true. And I mean, we see Signal used in pretty much all industries, especially at the higher end. We see it used extensively in government, at least, especially here in the US. We know very top officials use Signal. A lot of people around Washington, D.C. are using Signal because it is a tool used by governments. It's a tool used by businesses, executives. It's a tool used by security conscious people, privacy conscious people to protect their data. Um, like all of these privacy and security tools, it's not just something for criminals. It's not even something that's majority used by criminals. That's a very, very small percentage of what this stuff gets used for. And when you see media headlines about how the dark web or the Tor network is only used by criminals, or when you see like Bitcoin is only used by criminals, or when you see they've got to go after Graphene OS and target Graphene OS users at border checkpoints in other areas because all Graphene OS users are criminals. None of that is true. Um, it just serves I think there's just widespread campaigns in a lot of areas to discredit privacy services, software, etc., to discredit security tools that regular citizens can use, and all of that stuff. I think I don't know. I mentioned this on the forum. I don't know how serious I was, but I saw a lot of comments this morning about the Mulved stuff that I talked about earlier, and a lot of like misinformation, and people really trying to blow it up and talk about how Mulved is used by criminals and stuff like that. And I really do think, at least in some cases, there are campaigns where government agencies or other people who are interested in, less privacy and security are campaigning against these things to make people think um, that these services are worse than they are. In reality, it's just a useful tool. It's secure. Signal has a lot of features that make it better than other messenger apps that don't even have anything to do with security. So it's the kind of thing that really needs to stick around.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely an uphill battle, right? Because, there's, small nonprofits like Privacy Guides that are trying to fight for this, and on the other end is like, massive multinational corporations that are, you know, their entire business model is basically slurping up as much information as possible. So I think, yeah, I definitely wouldn't be surprised if they're, doing lobbying or disinformation campaigns to try and discredit this stuff, because I'm sure it does affect their bottom line. Like we've seen with when Apple released like that privacy opt-out feature, like Facebook lost money because, extra, extra, it was stopping certain amounts of data being collected. So, um, yeah, I guess we'll dive into that story a bit later. But yeah, that looks like kind of everything I had to add on that one. Why don't we dive into maybe some forum updates now?
Sure. Yeah, I think that seems like a good idea. Um, Again, we have a Q&A section at the end of this, so in a minute here, we are going to start taking even more viewer questions than we've been answering already. So if you've been holding on to any questions waiting for that, you can get ready to share those, or you can go ahead and start sharing those now. You can leave it in the live chat, or you can leave it on our forum post about this live stream, and we will take a look at all of those. I think the main form update we wanted to look at today was one that I posted to the project showcase because I just made a uh, video about Cape. I've been looking into Cape, the cell phone carrier, since this weekend, especially because they made some changes to their pricing scheme. I've been interested in Cape for a while, pretty much um, since and even before that 404 Media article came out in 2024, um, where he tried out Cape's phone and service and in the privacy features that those offered. Um, but it was kind of a service that was unattainable for a lot of people at $100 a month, so it wasn't something that I looked too seriously into. Um, but some of that stuff has changed, and I think they've added a lot of features since 2024 for sure that might be interesting for privacy people. And I think the cell phone stuff and carrier stuff has been coming up a bit more lately. So yeah, I've been using it. I switched some of my lines over and I made some first impressions in a video on my YouTube channel. Um, but there were a couple things I didn't talk about in that video, or a few things that I learned after the fact that are interesting as well. So the main thing that I wanted to ask the privacy guides community, I asked this on the forum, is whether that is an interesting topic to any of you, if we should agree to do an interview with them and kind of learn more about this stuff or learn more about mobile network security in general. It's a US specific thing, but I think a lot of the, at least privacy and security things might be interesting to a larger audience because it's all kind of universal, even if there aren't, unfortunately, really any carriers besides Cape who are implementing things like IMSI rotation uh, or offering secondary numbers or including all of the other features that they do. So there's that. I also learned a few updates about Cape since then. I mentioned in my video that you could block 2G and 3G on like Graphene OS, for example. I then found out that their SIM cards actually block 2G and 3G connections already. So it's not even possible for it to connect to those networks anymore. So that is a cool security feature. I've learned some other stuff as well, but I definitely want to ask them more about it in an interview that we do with them if that is a topic that people are interested in. So I think we'll probably save some of the updates for that actually. But yeah, let me know on the forum if this is a topic you'd like us to look into further. Like I said, this was just uh, my own first impressions. I haven't even had a chance to use it too much beyond this week, but I think all of the features are um, pretty promising and do have real life privacy applications. So I think it's a pretty cool service, and hopefully we can answer some more questions about it.
Yeah, I think maybe one thing that could be interesting to go into is like maybe just some of the basics of why this is possibly better than other carriers, I guess. Like what separates this? Is there any specific feature that you think is kind of important that people should know about this before we go into like a deep dive, I guess, when we investigate this a bit further?
Yeah, it really depends on the threat model, and I kind of broke this down in the video I had made a bit, but I think for a lot of people, the stuff like SIM swap protections is super important, especially like, I know a lot of people in the cryptocurrency space, if you use an exchange, they're very concerned about SIM swaps, and a lot of them have already been paying various carriers $100 a month or more because they claim to offer SIM swap protection, and so Cape probably seemed like a reasonable cost to them, but I think it's an even better deal now, and I think better SIM swap protection being accessible to more people is a good thing. So I think that's a huge protection. Um, but they also have protections against things like IMSI catchers or sniffers, which we've seen talked about by various organizations like the EFF for a very long time, and the EFF still considers these to be a big concern. I would certainly be concerned about something like that, like in Minneapolis here when there were protests a few months ago, or where there was kind of law enforcement invasion of the area, and you don't really know what kind of equipment they're deploying, but um, it's not going to protect against every threat. It certainly is not going to protect against somebody having access to the cell towers, but it is a reasonable protection against those kind of man-in-the-middle attacks with those IMSI catchers and other things that really anyone can use. You can get off-the-shelf ones. You can, or law enforcement certainly has them, which is a concern for activists and journalists in various areas. So yeah. Um, That's the main stuff. I am learning some stuff since making that video about how their mobile core works, and I think some of that is interesting. And I didn't really touch on that at all in my impressions video because I wasn't aware of everything it does, but I've been talking to someone at Cape about how that works, and I want to continue figuring that out. And we'll probably, like, if we do a deep dive or an interview, I definitely want to ask them more about that and what privacy security advantages it gives them, because I do think it gives, now that I've learned more about it, I think there are advantages that that does give them over other MVNOs that isn't just snake oil, but we do gotta dive into that for sure. Um, so yeah, Nate asked if I have thoughts. That is kind of my general thoughts. I think I covered that, although I probably talked about it a bit more in my section on it in the video. So there is stuff on the MZ rotation. I kind of gave an overview of it. If there are specific questions, I want to, like, I'm getting some information from Cape, and then I want to discuss this with the forum and the rest of the team. If there's any specific questions we have remaining, because I do want to do a deep dive into how this works, what threats this protects against, etc. That I think would be super helpful for people considering this service. Oh yeah, there's the video on the screen. So you can check it out, or you can wait for us to do more Cape coverage here. But yeah, this mobile stuff comes up every once in a while, and I think this is time to get into it finally. Um, Name asked, do we feel like the biggest problem with cellular networks is the triangulation, or are there other bigger problems? With the cell phone networks themselves, like the carriers invading our privacy, I think the bigger problem is, well, I mean, triangulation is a huge problem because they can really track your location anywhere. But a lot of cell carriers are well known to collect all this data, sell this data, store a lot of data about how you use the internet, who you make phone calls with, who you're texting, etc. Um, and they, yeah, like I said, they sell it, they misuse that data. It's a lot of privacy and security concerns that we've seen come up in the news before. um, this is something that, like I mentioned, that mobile core earlier, I think that that does give them more significant advantages over other MVNOs in terms of what data the underlying carrier can collect. But that is something that I want to save for uh, an interview or deep dive that we do, because I got to find out more information about that myself, but I think it looks promising. Um, but yeah, there is a, I don't know if this is only on iPhone or if Android is introducing a similar version, but recently Apple announced a feature that lets you limit precise tracking by cell carriers, which I'm not sure exactly how that even works because it's only supported by Boost Mobile in the US, and I haven't seen a ton of documentation on it. So hopefully it becomes more widespread. It's one of the things I want to ask Cape about, whether they hope to support a feature like that, or if they're even possible, or if it's even possible if they're using, US Cellular and AT&T's networks. So yeah, we'll see. I think limiting that kind of stuff would be great because triangulation is a concern, but there are also a lot of other concerns with carriers that I think should be addressed. Cape, I got into this a bit more in my video. Cape doesn't provide a huge amount of protection against the carrier themselves, but it is decent protection against, all those third parties, like I was saying.
I think probably the biggest discussion that we've had internally is kind of around pricing, I would say.
Yeah, how
So I
much
think
are I could ask you, how much are phone plans typically in Australia?
I mean, I feel like it's not that different. Like I would say maybe like on the high end is like maybe 50 $50. That's like on the high end.
Yeah.
So
See, so I mean, it's a bit different. I was telling this, one of our team members on the forum said, said he gets cell service, for $5 a month, and I think he gets some sort of good deal, but he said it's still like relatively cheap, but he's in the Netherlands, which is obviously a very small country. You don't need a lot of towers. My home state of Minnesota, over 5 times bigger than that entire country. So the pricing wise, it's a bit different in the US. And I think that $50 a month is it's certainly more than people who are like shopping around for different carriers would pay for, because you can get something like Visible or Mint Mobile or US Mobile for around $25 a month typically. A lot of these like US Mobile and Mint Mobile, I know, do have deals where you can get it for even cheaper, sometimes under $20 a month if you prepay a full year in advance, which I don't know if I would suggest, but obviously if you want the most value for your dollar, that is a good option. Um, but yeah, I know a lot of people who are on these post-paid plans directly with T-Mobile, with Verizon, with AT&T, and those plans go upwards of 85 to $100 a month for a single line. And I know people who pay that, which is, I mean, that's a bit crazy to me, but I think there is demand at $50 a month. And I do think, like, well, it's more expensive than other prepaid carriers. For some people, these features will be worth it. Another thing I did like that I think people could make use of is secondary phone numbers that are not VoIP numbers. So for verification codes and stuff like that, you don't have to use your main number. There aren't a lot of services that offer that. They tend to be somewhat expensive, so that being bundled in makes a difference. Um, I don't know. The pricing side of things is less interesting to me, other than I think it's like it's not outrageously expensive anymore. It's just normal expensive, like it's on the higher end. But uh, you know, the other thing I would say is like that includes taxes and fees, which you don't commonly see from carriers, at least in the US here. When I'm talking like 85, $100 a month, that's like before people pay their taxes and fees on it, which is ridiculous. So yeah, obviously it's not the most price competitive out there. Like I said, there's prepaid carriers much cheaper, but I think for some people those protections can be worth it. I would probably expect a bit higher security from uh someone like Cape than someone like Mint, especially like account security, like SIM swapping stuff. So yeah, it all depends on what you think, but I think if any of the features sound interesting to you, I'm personally, I've been using it just for a week, but I've been using it as the main data on uh, both of my phones actually, and I haven't had any issues with performance or coverage. Um, Minnesota here is pretty good infrastructure, so if you have bad AT&T or US cellular coverage in your area, that may be it may be different from you, so you got to try it out. But yeah, I haven't had any issues. So I would say at least try it out and see what you think. If it's easy for you to switch, uh, and you're interested in the features. And if you're not interested in the features, then don't switch to it and buy probably US Mobile. That's where I hear the best reviews. That's where I switched one of my lines from, and I didn't have a lot of issues with US Mobile. I know a lot of people in this space tend to use Mint in the US because you can get that without any information either. You can pick it up at a store. I don't remember what information US Mobile asked for, but I don't think they sell in any like stores. So you can't get it in cash at least. So Mint could be a good option if you are concerned about that. But there's other prepaid options out there. So yeah.
Okay, I guess one question that I feel like most people will probably have. I feel like this is a common question, especially in the US. Like, what are the which networks does this use exactly? Like, is this
I was you know what? I did ask them about this. They were pretty cagey about it, and didn't want to share exact details. They said they can't with for contractual reasons. Um, the reasons kind of make sense, but that's something I'd like them to explain in an interview if people if I mean, I think we'll do one probably. So whenever we get a chance to do one, I'd love for them to kind of explain that. I know that their primary network is US Cellular, which is not an MVNO for people confused. They have their own towers, but their coverage is very small. It's very regional. and they were just acquired by T-Mobile, so I don't know how that affects it. But they also work with AT&T, and I think unless you are in one of the few areas with US cellular coverage, you would be on AT&T. Um, they yeah, like I said in the email to me, they were cagey about it. They can't disclose anything other than AT&T, which they say on their website, but so they kind of left it open to the possibility that maybe there are other carriers. But as far as I know at this moment, and as far as I can tell, there are no other carriers that it works on. It's just AT&T. So I would assume it's only that.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess the other thing is we did talk a little bit about the pricing and such, but like, is this, I heard there was, is this $100 a month? Is this $70 a month? Is this $50 a month? Like, what's the, because I feel like that is, I think for a lot of people, like kind of maybe a deciding factor, like how much value you get from this from this product, basically,
Yeah,
for the
for sure.
price.
The price used to be $100 a month, which is why I was like, that's untenable for a lot of people. It doesn't make sense really to pay that much, even if you like the features, unless you are like super high net worth. You need to protect a lot of money, or if you're super concerned about IMSI catches or anything like that. But like an average person will not get enough value out of it for $100, unfortunately. Right now it's $70, and for life, if you sign up currently, if you sign up with a referral code, that takes another $20 off for life. So it is, I mean, these referral codes are anywhere on the internet. You can probably watch any video with Cape. You can probably find them on Cape's own subreddit or other subreddits for referrals. You can use any of these codes and you can get $20 off. So I would basically consider the base price to be 50 because I think it'd be crazy if you don't use someone's referral code to sign up for this. So uh basically $50. That's the only way that you can get a discount is through their referral program. So uh that's basically how family plans work too, is what I was gonna say. So if you wanted to sign up for a bunch of lines, you would just self-refer, and that would bring your average cost lower than $50, which is similar to how other family plans from big carriers work. So there is a way to get even more discounted rates. If you were doing that self-referral thing, each referral you make is another $20 off for as long as that subscriber stays active. So for family plans, you can get a lot closer to that $30 a month price. But yeah, I would say 50 is the max you should be paying right now. If you're paying 70, um, you should reconsider how you signed up. And you can't sign up for
Yeah.
more than 70 right now. That's kind of the max.
Okay, yeah, I definitely did see, like, they definitely were, pitching this product at $100 originally. And I remember looking at that and thinking, like, that is a lot of money for, I guess, one. Is this also like they didn't really talk about this a lot, but I don't know, maybe you have some more insight since you've used it for a little while now. Um, this is an unlimited, like this is unlimited data then, or
Yeah.
okay.
Unlimited data. Um, they make some claims about it might be deprioritized after a certain amount. I know their hotspot says slower speeds after 30. I have not used enough data in this week to test that out, so I don't know what that experience is like. Um, or whether they're even enforcing it, because sometimes you see these things in various companies' terms of service about like limits and stuff, but it's kind of a soft limit where they're not necessarily enforcing it. But if you're using like way beyond what they're asking for, maybe they're gonna they're gonna ask you to stop doing that or place some limit on your account or something. So yeah, whatever that says on their website is what they guarantee. But usually with the deprioritized data stuff, it's not a huge issue in my experience, at least with other carriers, unless
Mm.
I'm at like a huge event with a ton of people, all trying to use their phones at once.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, the other thing is, there's also, I mean, it doesn't say anywhere on their website. It says just high-speed data. Is that something you've tested, or like, have you noticed any differences in speed or anything
Yeah,
like that?
so unfortunately, I don't have any AT&T service, so I don't know how, like, their normal speeds are on, like, a postpaid plan. I have a Verizon postpaid plan on my iPhone right now. I was switching between them. I get pretty much the same, almost identical speeds as that Verizon plan that I do on Cape. So far it seems like the same range as well, which is to say, I mean, Verizon has had pretty good range and speeds anywhere I go in the US, so it hasn't been an issue on Cape either. Because I have the dual SIM on my phone, I set Cape to be my data plan, and then I turned off the data switching so I would only be using Cape, and that hasn't caused any problems for me.
Right. Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting service. I kinda wish I had access to this sort of service because I think a lot of people, like, want these like, I think, a lot of people want to have, especially what you said, like, with the SIM swapping stuff, like, it's like it's such a basic thing that so many carriers just don't get right. Like, they just don't protect that properly.
Yeah, I think it's a side that people, at least in the privacy community, don't consider as much because I think a lot of people are concerned about like the triangulation problem or location tracking or even the data selling that these carriers do, and all of that is a problem. But on the other side of things, like account security is a problem. All of the legacy stuff in the tech stack, all of the software that these carriers are running, all of that is typically old and vulnerable. And so if you see security breaches or cyber attacks against big carriers, it's because of that legacy infrastructure and legacy code that they're running, which is just not up to the standards of a modern company. And so, yeah, I totally agree that stuff like SIM swapping protection is important. I think Cape, like, I've seen this sentiment expressed on the Graphene OS forum, for example. If you look at discussions about Cape, they do a pretty good job on their blog of really explaining how all of these features work and why they're important. I think a lot of people are thrown off if you go to the blog because they have a lot of clickbaity headlines, which is not great. It's kind of like I don't know. A lot of privacy companies have this problem. I could certainly talk about Proton's blog for quite a while, but unlike some of these other privacy companies, if you read these blogs, they're actually quite detailed. They're technical, but they also explain it well. So they are useful resources if you're interested in why these features matter and what they're doing differently. The vibe that I get is that Cape is really positioning themselves as more of like a tech startup company than like an MVNO telecom company that's just doing another phone plan, right? Like they are saying that their biggest benefit is that they know how to do all the software side of things properly and securely, which is probably a lot better than what a lot of other carriers and MVNOs are doing for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think they do have the benefit though of like starting from scratch, right? Like a lot of these telecom companies, they're probably like, scraping by with like systems from the 90s and stuff like that. So it definitely is a benefit. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely an interesting service. I think there was definitely a lot of like if you haven't already, like if you're watching this and you're not really sure about it, I would definitely check out what people are saying on our forum about it because there's some interesting discussion about it there. And
Yeah.
yeah, I
And
definitely
if
think
you
it'd
have
be good
thoughts or
to.
questions, share them. Or
Mm.
if you do try it out, share your experiences because I'm really curious more than anything to know what every other people in the US who try it out are experiencing with it. And if you think it's worth it, at $50 a month or any price you can get. That $70 a month promo that they're doing right now, I don't know if they've said it explicitly, but they implied on their site it runs through the end of the year. I am hoping, um, that they stick with it because I can't imagine they'll get a huge amount of mass adoption at their original price, unfortunately. But I guess we'll see what they do. I have no idea. I saw a couple comments here. Uh, Name said US mobile is the best. I've heard a lot of people say that. I saw this comment as well that you're switching to Silent Link. I would be really curious if you wanna share in the chat why, you decided to switch to Silent Link. I haven't looked at Silent Link in a while. If I remember correctly, they had pretty good pricing in the US, but I don't remember if they had an unlimited plan. And I looked in some other countries, and it can get very expensive, so, that wouldn't apply to you, but, um, Silent Link is nice that they at least offer service in a lot of different countries, but I do have to check it out more. I don't have a lot of experience with Silent Link, unfortunately. I know um, other people on YouTube and other people in this space have checked that out more than I have.
Definitely. Okay, so I guess that's kind of it for like the forum updates. I guess we can kind of dive into some questions here. You see anything here that we might have missed, possibly?
Now I gotta scroll through the chat again.
All right.
I did get a question from a soulless space earlier that I was going to answer, and then I forgot to. But about tutorials and other guides that we can do. Uh, they asked if we could do like a getting started with Docker tutorial. That's not about any specific service, but just an introduction to Docker. We'll consider that. I definitely was thinking about like just a general guide for setting up a server securely, how to like self-host stuff that we can use as like a basic guide to point people to before one of our more in-depth guides that just covers basic stuff like securing SSH, setting up a firewall, all that sort of thing. I would have to look into something like Portainer more. In my experience, setting up Docker can sometimes depend on what you're going to run. Um, the basic setup with just Docker and Docker Compose tends to be simpler, and usually what people recommend when you start getting into these web apps to manage apps. In my experience, they can sometimes cause more problems than they solve, but so I don't know what we'll end up recommending, people do. We'll have to give it more thought. But yeah, if we do any, like, basic setup that we can reuse for other guides, we'll probably include something about this sort of thing.
Definitely. Someone here, Solid Snack, said I'm using my sudo works great, but one con is that it doesn't work globally. Yeah, it's really weird with my sudo. Like it's available in kind of random countries. It seems like it's available in Australia for some reason. There's no Australian numbers. I don't know what's going on there. It's available in like Canada, the UK. So yeah, not really sure what's going on with that. Sod this all just gifted a Privacy Guides membership.
Thank
Thank you.
you, and yeah, thanks for giving that to someone else. I didn't see who received that, but hopefully they check out some of the early access or members only videos that we have, but yeah, thanks for supporting.
Nate said, "Let's do a video explaining all the different kinds of Docker." Yeah, it's so Nate has a bit of a grudge against Docker because there's kind of different versions like Docker, Docker Compose, like
I
all this
mean,
is.
I definitely do think we should include this in the video because I think, yeah, this is something I want to cover because it's not as complicated, I think, as Nate is making it out to be. There's really only like one thing you have to install. Um, but doing it the right way is important, obviously. So we should definitely get that covered in a video. I think a good server setup video is not a bad idea. So as we do more self-hosting guides, that'll be big. There's a lot of different software that I think we should try and cover because I think walking people through things that's helpful for a lot of people for sure. Name said check out Umbrel OS. I have seen a lot of these kind of like batteries included, operating systems that give you the web GUI, they give you basic apps to install, that sort of thing. I've looked at a few of them and I don't remember which ones I have tried or if I have tried this one out or not yet. Um, they get a pretty mixed reaction on the forum. I would definitely look up and see if there is an Umbrella OS thread that exists, or if one needs to be created, or if there are thoughts in that thread about whether it's good or whether there are concerns. I'd have to look that up. Um, but yeah, they can sometimes end up being more, I guess, bloat on top of everything than it's worth. But on the other hand, they can make things simpler. So it kind of just depends on what kind of setup you want. I've personally always I feel like it's just been less stable in my experience, unfortunately, when I've used similar operating systems in the past. But maybe they have improved recently. That's certainly possible. I haven't used something like Umbrella OS in a while.
Yeah, there's definitely benefits and issues with either approach, but I think, yeah, it definitely, I feel like things like Umbrella OS and those sort of pre-installed operating systems, like it does open the door a little bit for more people to access it who, might not want to use the terminal and stuff, which is good. But then, when it breaks, it becomes kind of a massive issue. So
It is really like the Apple approach to things where, like, when it works, and when it doesn't, how are you gonna solve any of your problems, right? It's just kind of a black box in a lot of cases.
yeah, that's not great from that aspect. I guess there's someone here says I've been self-hosting Entei. It's so good. Yeah, that is another thing we could definitely look at as well.
I've been really curious to try that out myself. I mean, it's good to know that you had a good experience because I've always wondered with some of these products, and I never looked at NT self-hosting too closely to see if this was the case, but I feel like with a lot of service provider businesses like NT, it's pretty common for them to release something open source, but not make it easy to self-host. And I do know that they worked pretty hard on making a self-hostable version, but I wasn't sure how easy it actually was to self-host. So, um, yeah, something I want to look into more, but that is good to know.
Yeah, I have looked at it before, and it's one of the easiest that I've seen. It does rely kind of on running a script though. Like you run one command and that's it. So it's kind
Very
of
cool.
easy.
Love to see what that script does. Those, yeah, that kind of software is a little strange to me, but I've also definitely used a lot of software like that. I know like even our forum discourse is like that, where it's an insanely complicated Docker setup, but you don't have to do any of it because it just has a script that does it. And
Mhm.
if the script is good, there you go.
Yeah.
I see we have XMR Monero chat reminder in the chat. I do want to say I do want to get XMR chat up, like I said before. Um, and honestly, I do keep forgetting, but we should figure it out. And I'll definitely work on that. I will say, if you want to send us Monero at privacyguides.org/donate, and then also just leave a comment as a member in the live stream thread on the forum, you could do that, or just leave a live chat here still, because we tend to have enough time, or we just stick around too long on the show to answer everyone's questions these days. So yeah, we don't have like a super chat system yet, but we do appreciate any chats, donations, other support that we can get, because uh super important if you like this sort of stuff, which hopefully at least some of you watching do.
Someone said, oh, someone's talking about like my sudo requiring like, Google Pay and Apple Pay and like requiring an app. I think it's worth checking out jmp.chat as an alternative. I mean, I think it's pretty similar in price as well. And that doesn't have those restrictions as far as I'm aware. It's kind of platform agnostic. You can, as long as you have XMPP or Matrix client, you can basically tap into it.
Yeah,
To
that
actually,
JMP.chat is definitely it's probably the one I see most commonly used, even beyond, like, services like MySudo, for example.
hmm.
Thanks for the 1 pound saw this all appreciated. Glad it felt appropriate.
Yeah, no, JMP.chat. I do think my sudo has kind of gone in a direction like they're adding like all these extra things, and I feel like a lot of people like only just use it because they want the second number, like they want another number
Yeah.
basically, and kind of adding all these extra things that not everyone needs. So yeah, jmp.chat, that's, I mean, I feel like we should maybe at some point investigate like these VoIP things. I think that would definitely be kind of important to look at because, yeah, there's definitely quite a few different options. Terracotta Pie said hi. Hi. I'm not really seeing too many more questions here, so I feel like we can probably start to wrap this up.
Yeah, I think so. You can give people a second last chance, or let us know if you have no more questions, and we can take that as a sign as well. Just share in the chat.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just run through the outro here, and if there's any other questions, I guess we can grab that. So all the updates from this week in privacy will be shared on the blog every week, and that's already gone out for this episode. So if you were wondering what the stories were this week, you can check that out at privacyguides.org/live. You should be able to see the post is already live. So if you sign up for the newsletter, you can do that with either your favorite RSS reader, or you can also just do it with an email that just goes out every time we start the live stream. And if you prefer audio, we also have an audio podcast and possibly a video podcast coming soon, but we'll see how that goes. So yeah, you can access the podcast on basically any popular podcast platform. And of course, as usual, this video will also be synced to PeerTube, so you don't have to watch on Google's platform. Privacy Guides is an impartial nonprofit organization that is focused on building a strong privacy advocacy community and delivering the best digital privacy and consumer technology rights advice on the internet. And if you want to support our mission, you can go to privacyguides.org/donate. And if you want to make a donation from our main website, you can go to privacyguides.org and press the red heart icon in the top right-hand corner of the page. And you can also contribute using standard fiat currency like a debit or a credit card, or you can also donate anonymously with Monero or either your favorite cryptocurrency. And also by becoming a paid member, you'll unlock exclusive perks like early access to video content and priority during the This Week in Privacy live stream Q&A, and you'll also get a cool badge on your profile in the Privacy Guides forum. And also the warm, fuzzy feeling of supporting independent media. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you next week.
See ya.